4.448 kilometres in length, 2.764 miles makes up this splendid Phillip Island circuit. 12 corners, 5 of them right, 7 of them left. A real tough mission this for Michelin and Pirelli, our tyre suppliers, across all 3 World Championship categories. Sector 1 includes the scary braking zone into the Dewan corner, through Stoner corner, halfway through that second split. The wonderful section of 7, 8 and 9 as you attack through the Lukey Heights, downhill braking zone into turn 10, one of 2 first gear corners around this Phillip Island track. 350 odd kilometres an hour they nudge down the Gardner Straight. 1, 2, 4 and 10 are your overtaking hot spots around this Phillip Island circuit. This was 12 months ago. What a move this was from Marc Marquez on the inside of Jorge Martin into the Miller corner. So just 7 days after he was crowned 2025 MotoGP World Champion was the Mandalika Grand Prix. Marc Marquez's farewell to 2025. The results of this first lap contact with Marco Bezzecchi on the factory Aprilia left Marc with a fractured right shoulder blade. It leaves Marco Bezzecchi from the front row of the grid here in Phillip Island with a double long lap in tomorrow's Australian Grand Prix. But it was Fermin Aldeguer, having worked his way through on the stubborn Pedro Acosta in the first 6 or 7 laps over Indonesia. A nightmare day for the factory Ducati team with Marquez injured, Pecco Bagnaia crashing out of last place. But it was Fermin Aldeguer over the line to create history, the second youngest rider in MotoGP to win. First rookie we've had on the tops of the podium since Martin at the Styrian round in Austria. That was in 2021, 4 years ago. And you now join us live for our build-up for coverage of the Tissot Sprint here in round 19 of 22 in this MotoGP World Championship, which has already gone, of course, in favour of Marc Marquez. It has been already a scintillating sprint Saturday. What a Q2 session we had this morning, where it was drama from the first lap to the last lap. Out of all of that chaos in the 15-minute Q2 session, under what are glorious blue skies, it was Fabio Quartararo, the flying Frenchman, that led the way with a record-breaking lap of 1:26.465. First time a Yamaha has taken pole position here in Phillip Island since Maverick Vinales in 2019. Joined on the front row by Marco Bezzecchi, who was fastest on Friday for the 3rd Grand Prix in a row. And what about this for a story? Jack Miller coming through Q1, the home crowd hero who started this Australian Grand Prix weekend fastest yesterday on Friday morning. Second to Aldeguer he was in Q1. And Jack Miller on an unforgettable Saturday so far for Yamaha. First time 2 Yamaha start together on a front row since Assen, the Dutch TT, back in 2021. On that occasion, it was Fabio Quartararo and Maverick Vinales. Vinales, one of 3 high-profile stars, sadly missing from this weekend's Australian Grand Prix. The 3 of them will also be missing from next weekend's action in Sepang. Marc Marquez, of course, Jorge Martin and Maverick Vinales sidelined through injury. Mark Burton-Lewis sort of be in the commentary box. Jack Appleyard down in pit lane on a sprint Saturday which started under very miserable and grey and wet skies, but thankfully for this upcoming 13-lap sprint, which will be lights out in about 25 minutes, we are soaking up some serious sunshine. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon here in this part of South Australia. Barely a cloud in the sky as we look out of our commentary box position, perched just on the edge of Miller Corner at turn 4. It's where the Miller army of fans will be gathered for the sprint and the Grand Prix here tomorrow, and they will see Miller on the front row of the grid for the first time in 45 races. Motegi 2023 was the Aussies' last front row start. The absence of big names like Marquez, Martin and Vinales, well, it really has thrown this Australian Grand Prix wide open. A second row which features Ralph Fernandez, Pedro Acosta and Alex Marquez. Lewis, it's been wet, it's been certainly wild for most of this weekend so far. A brilliant front row, particularly if you're a fan of Yamaha, Quartararo and Jack Miller either side of Marco Bezzecchi. A pretty tough second row as well. This is a very hard sprint and Grand Prix to call.
Wet and wild, but wonderful to watch so far. The fastest ever MotoGP laps of Phillip Island earlier on today. An incredible qualifying 2 session, which certainly had plenty of stories to tell, including some penalties to bring you up to speed with as we go through our build-up to the sprint, which will take effect tomorrow. Of course, Marco Bezzecchi has a double long lap penalty to serve tomorrow. The fact that that applies tomorrow, not today, surely means that today is Bez's big opportunity to claim victory, but he will have to overcome the flying Frenchman Fabio Quartararo, as pumped up as I've seen him for quite some time, to take pole position. He's had to wait a while since Assen pre-summer break for his last pole position, but a 26.465 for Quartararo puts him at the front of the grid, and he has got a genuine sprint victory chance here.
5th pole position of 2025 for Quartararo, the 26-year-old Frenchman, 21st MotoGP pole position. He has never been victorious in the new sprint era. Just the 3 sprint podiums to his name for Fabio Quartararo in our previous 57. First time Mo Ducati on the front row of the grid since the Grand Prix of Europe at Valencia back in 2020. That was a run extending 98 races. Well, he's called Thriller Miller, and Miller has thrilled the home fans, hasn't he, so far here this weekend. First front row start, as mentioned, in 45 Grand Prix for the Aussie. The first Australian in front of his home crowd to fire away from the front row of the grid since one of the best to ever do it around here, Aussie legend Casey Stoner, all the way back in 2012.
Splitting the Yamahas on the front row of the grid is Marco Bezzecchi, who looked the overwhelming favourite for pole coming into qualifying. It was a bit of a fraught Q2 for Bez, it has to be said. Caught some yellow flags for the first of 2 Alex Marquez crashes in qualifying 2, and then was balked by, of all people, one of his best friends, Pecco Bagnaia, who has been given a 3-place grid penalty for that, but that doesn't take effect until tomorrow, so he will start from 11th on the grid, will the 63. Bezzecchi starts from 2nd, and there is no doubting that he and that Aprilia have got serious front-running pace.
Yeah, Marco Bezzecchi was red hot, wasn't he, yesterday? Fastest on Friday, just as he was recently in Japan and over Indonesia. Pecco Bagnaia was not the only rider in a bit of hot water this morning. He bulked Marco Bezzecchi on that run down to turn 4 in Q2, and also a 3-place grid penalty for the Grand Prix tomorrow for South African Brad Binder. He bulked quite badly through turn 7 late on in that Q2 session. Johan Zarco, who was very, very frustrated, and with good reason. Zarco, well, he was threatening a place, wasn't he, in that second qualifying session. That was the moment. Turn 7, you could just see there that blur, that flash of LCR Honda sweeping on through when Zarco was flying. And that's going to cost Brad Binder 3 places on the grid. He will drop down to the head of row 6 tomorrow in 16th place.
Binder knew immediately that he'd made a mistake there, immediately raised his left hand in apology to Johan Zarco, but that's not going to do anything to lighten the mood of Johan, who had already got a bit under the collar earlier on this morning in free practice 2 after he'd crashed at turn 10. Zarco 15th on the grid, one of just 2 previous Australian Grand Prix winners on the grid this afternoon.
Last time out in Mandalika, just the 7th rider. Some milestone this for the 35-year-old Frenchman. Just the 7th rider in Grand Prix history to make 300 starts. Some career. Zarco has had, of course, a double Moto2 world champion. Slow online during qualifying, first event of the season. Then for Italian Pecco Bagnaia. 4th time now, the last 6 Grand Prix, Bagnaia is going to find himself starting outside of the top 10. He incurred the wrath of his good buddy Marco Bezzecchi, breaking into the Miller corner. Bezzecchi was really, really angered with this one, and with some justification, he almost then clipped into a fellow VR46 Academy stablemate Luca Marini, who was trying to keep himself out of bother on the edge of the long lap penalty loop. Bez losing his cool. We've not said that too often so far this weekend here in Phillip Island. Those 2 are known trash talkers between each other, and I think it's fair to say that during the lunch break here, it was Bagnaia on the receiving end of some Bez trash talking. Yeah, Bezzecchi rightfully a little bit miffed with that one.
it was clear with the almost surprised reaction of Bagnaia when he saw the flash of Aprilia coming up his inside, that Bagnaia simply didn't realise that Bez was there. But that's not a defence for the two-time MotoGP world champion, who is not going in alone for the factory Ducati team here this weekend. Of course, Michele Pirro is replacing Marc Marquez, but all of the hopes of any kind of success this weekend for the Ducati factory team were on Bagnaia. Those hopes are surely remote, even today from 11th, but certainly tomorrow when he starts from 14th.
We just saw there the number 54 Gresini Racing Ducati of Aldeguer leading pit lane. There was no fairy tale continuation of his excellent qualifying record here in Phillip Island this morning. He'd had 3 Moto2 starts here at this magnificent venue, and he'd been on pole position in the lots. He did lead Jack Miller in that epic battle in Q1. 7th on the grid, though, goes Aldeguer, who, of course, tomorrow has an opportunity to become the first rookie in 12 long years since Marc Marquez took back-to-back victories all the way back in 2013. Quartararo and Bez then, side by side as they start this sighting lap here in Phillip Island. Surely they're going to be side by side in the early part of this sprint. Those two big favourites to lock horns together in this 13-lap battle coming up in just under 20 minutes' time.
Of course, a big story of the Indonesia weekend were Bez's starts. They were not great, either of them, for 2 very different reasons. Had a clutch issue getting himself off the line in the sprint, which, to be fair, made the sprint quite a spectacle as he rampaged back through the field to pass Fermin Aldeguer for victory on the final lap. And then in the Grand Prix itself, he was late to the grid, didn't get all his pre-flight checks sorted out before he saw the start lights ready to go out in front of his face, and was a little late reacting to the red lights going out, dropped himself back down the order, and of course that triggered the train reaction which led to the collision with Marc Marquez. So important, perhaps more important tomorrow given his penalties, but important today too for Bez to get that Aprilia off the line.
He's been a superstar so far on this sprint Saturday. Hans Quartararo, he was 3rd fastest this morning in the half-hour FP2 session. Jack Miller then, well, this is certainly new territory as far as he's concerned on a Yamaha YZR M1. He's never been on the front row on a Yamaha. Casey Stoner, of course, as I mentioned, the last Australian to start his home Grand Prix from the front row. First time that's happened since 2012. Now then, Trackhouse Aprilia are having a great spell, aren't they, at the moment? Ralph Fernandez clearly in the best form of his MotoGP career right now. A sprint podium last time out off the front row, Mandalika. He's firmly in the hunt again here today, going from the head of the second row in 4th spot. Back-to-back sprint podiums? Well, why not? Let's get the thoughts of Trackhouse boss Davide Brivio, who joins Jack.
Yeah, why not indeed? You can tell that Raul is brimming with confidence at the moment. Another great opportunity ahead, Davide.
Yeah, another, I mean, looks like a good weekend. Raul has been fast since the beginning, since yesterday morning, and good pace, good lap time. So yeah, of course we're happy, and let's see. We have a couple of opportunities. Hopefully we race tomorrow also, and let's try. Maybe now, I hope after Indonesia was more, let's say, try to get a little bit more relaxed on fighting at the front. But let's see. I mean, you know, the race is always unpredictable, but here we are, very close to the first row, I mean second row, and you can try to play your card.
Absolutely. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks as always to Trackhouse boss Davide Brivio. Yeah, let's see if Ralph Fernandez can play his cards. Has he got an ace up his sleeve potentially for another sprint podium? He was an excellent second yesterday in what was an outstanding Friday here in Phillip Island, and Aprilia 1-2. Raul finishing pretty close behind Marco Bezzecchi. So Pecco Bagnaia, what lies in store then for the Italian? 14th on the grid for tomorrow's Australian Grand Prix. Bit of a fist bump there for Fabio Quartararo. 9th front row start incoming for the Frenchman. In terms of Grand Prix of late for Quartararo, he has scored points in the last 10. 8 of those have been top 10, but a top 6 has deserted him in the last 3 since the circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Well, that gives you a clear idea, doesn't it, just how close we are to this beautiful rugged coastline here in Phillip Island. About 120 kilometres south of Melbourne, 90 minutes or so from downtown Melbourne. And in this weather, when it's glorious sunshine like this, there is no better place for Grand Prix motorcycle racing on planet Earth than Phillip Island. Alex Marquez had an eventful Q2, 2 crashes in that second qualifying session. Still, though, finds himself in 6th place on the grid, ahead of Fermin Alligator. We'll go back down to Jack very, very quickly shortly. We'll just run quickly through the grid.
Quartararo, Bezzecchi, Miller is your front row. Medium front for Quartararo, hard front for Bez and Miller. On the second row, difficult to read there, but I can confirm it's Fernandez Acosta and Alex Marquez, despite his 2 Q1 crashes. Fermin Alligator 7th from Pol Espargaro and Luca Marini. Gian Antonio, Bagnaia and Rins is your 4th row. The graphics will catch up shortly, so I'll run you through it. Binder, Mir and Zarco on the 5th row. All penalties on the grid take effect tomorrow, so it's Oliveira, Morbidelli, Agura, Savadori, Bastianini, Chantra, and completing the grid is Michele Pirro.
So Alex Marquez looking to cement or secure 2nd place in the World Championship, 6th on the grid. Fermin Alligator, Mandalika winner is 7th. Let's go and hear the thoughts of the boss, Michele Massini. Thanks for your patience, guys.
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. Michele, a huge crash for Alex this morning. Just firstly, how is he?
He's okay, 100%. Just not the qualify we would like to do it, but so the first thing is that Alex is okay. The other thing that at the end not too bad start from the 2nd row, so we will try to manage a good start and try to recover some position in the few first laps.
I think you had high hopes for Fermin this weekend. Aside from what happened in Mandalika, he's got great form, he loves this place, but it's been a complicated weekend so far. Did he manage to turn a corner this morning?
No, I think that the speed is there, but we struggle a bit to put all together. That this is crucial in the MotoGP category, but I hope that we can make a good sprint today, hopefully in the top 5.
Good luck, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks to Michele Massini. Yeah, there was a sense around Alex Marquez's side of that Italian garage that he got out of jail a little bit this morning. A couple of crashes, as Jack mentioned, a real fast one going into the Durham corner. He tipped off as well at turn 4. So to get away with 2 crashes and still find himself qualifying inside the top 6, it could have been a lot worse as far as the 29-year-old Spaniard is concerned. Escorted then by his wife, Ruby. It is Jack Miller on the front row of the grid. First Aussie that's been in this position here in Phillip Island in MotoGP since Stoner all the way back in 2012. Jack Miller, like Fabio Quartararo, his fellow Yamaha star, never victorious previously in a sprint. The 3 sprint rostrums for Quartararo, just the 2 for Miller. His last, of course, when he was on the KTM factory RC16 at the Saxon Ring in 2023.
I think he was the first rider ever to lead a sprint, wasn't he, Miller? He led the first lap of the first sprint back in Portimao a couple of years ago when he was on a KTM, which has now been ridden by Pedro Acosta, and he's got a real chance too. And that's what makes this sprint so exciting. There are so many possible podium contenders in this, and Pedro Acosta certainly falls into that category, getting himself up onto the 2nd row in 5th place. The leading KTM on the grid, 1 row ahead of Super Sub at Tech 3, Pol Espargaro.
Well, we all knew that Marc Marquez was going to be a massive miss as far as Ducati were concerned. How much of a miss? Well, it's the first time, as we mentioned, no Ducati on the front row of the grid since the European Grand Prix of Valencia in 2020. A front row that on that occasion did feature Pol Espargaro alongside the 2 Suzukis of Joan Mir and Alex Rins. It's the first time that no Ducati has qualified inside the top 5 since the Japanese Grand Prix Motegi 6 years ago, when the top 5 was Marc Marquez and a Honda. Quartararo was part of that top 5 on a Yamaha. Frankie Morbidelli on a Yamaha, Maverick Vinales on a Yamaha, and Cal Crutchlow on a Honda. And coincidentally, the top Ducati qualifier on that day was our front row starter this afternoon, none other than Jack Miller.
And Ducati's hopes of taking a victory in this sprint, you feel they really hinge on the shoulders of the Grassini pair, Alex Marquez and Fermin Alligator. The hopes of Australia, though, on the shoulders of Jack Miller. How's he feeling and what are his chances? Gino Borsois with Jack.
Gino, what a day so far for Jack, onto the front row, giving himself a great chance. What's possible today?
What you will start for the first roll is a great chance. Overall, it was a really great weekend, and not only for Jack, also all the Yamaha did a good job. So it means that this track is good for us, a good layout for our bike. But race is a race. This is also difficult. We know our pace is not really good. We need to improve a lot. Today is a good point to make some data, soon get some information, be ready for tomorrow. I think if you are able to make a really good race, top 5, it's a great result.
Thanks, Dino. Good luck.
Top 5, a great result then as far as Jack Miller is concerned. Jack and the Aussie fans will be hoping for a lot more. Certainly hoping and expecting a lot more in this morning's Q2 session was Fabio Di Gianantonio, who looked in great nick, didn't he, on Friday afternoon. The Italian took his first ever MotoGP podium here a couple of years ago. 3rd quickest on Friday, 2nd fastest this morning. So to see Digia stuck down in 10th place, heading that 4th row, I think he was pretty frustrated, pretty disappointed to miss out in those time attacks.
8th time this season in 19 Grand Prix that he's qualified off the front 3 rows of the grid, and for a bike as good as the one he's got, even if it has been questioned sometimes this year, that GP25, Digia should be starting a little higher up the grid than that. But do Aprilia ultimately have the superior pace in this Tissot sprint? Marco Bezzecchi goes from the front row of the grid with Ralph Fernandez right behind on row 2. Technical chief Fabiano Sterlachini now talking to Jack.
Yeah, Fabiano Aprilia in a great position here. We just heard from Davide Brivio, who said Raul's got a great chance, but it's obvious Marco a huge favourite for this one. Just how important is the start, though, after the 2 mistakes that were made in Mandalika? I imagine that's going to be on his mind.
Yeah, we saw that they are really important. Yes, for sure, we hope that after the disappointing event that we had, we tried to fix something in terms of riding, in terms also the techniques of the bike, in terms of tuning, and hopefully that we can do our normal start as we did in the previous races, where basically we maintain the position.
Knowing what's to come tomorrow, is there extra pressure on this one to maximise the points?
Not really, because sometimes if you extremize the pressure, then you can, let me say, be over-ambitious and make some mistakes. So the focus is to try to obtain the maximum that we can without mistake. That is the target.
Thanks, Fabiano. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks to Fabiano Sterlachini. Marco Bezzecchi started the sprint in Misano in front of his home crowd from the front row of the grid. He won the sprint. Last time out in Mandalika, Marco Bezzecchi started on the front row of the grid. He won the sprint after all the start dramas, fighting his way through, back from 8th place. 2 then of the last 3 sprints have gone the way of the factory Aprilia star. Ruled out in Japan, of course, when he got a clattering of his teammate Jorge Martin in turn 1. Well, so far, Sprint Saturday has been nothing but a rip-roaring success for Yamaha, with 2 bikes on the front row of the grid for the first time in 4.5 years, led by Fabio Quartararo from pole position. Let's get the thoughts of his boss, Maio Meregali, who's with Jack.
Maio, excellent job once again by Fabio this morning, but this feels different to those previous pole positions where I think we knew that the races would be more of a challenge. He's a real contender today. How big of an opportunity is this?
Yeah, the opportunity is big. As always, it will be very important to have a good start. I do believe that okay, the podium is feasible if circumstances will be normal. What he has been able to do this morning, I think, has been something incredible, because since we arrived, we couldn't expect. We couldn't expect to be competitive as we show, but also was impossible to think about the pole position. And yeah, he has been able to put together a fantastic luck. And now let's see what he will show us in a few minutes.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's find out what does lie in store over these 13 laps of Phillip Island from that 5th pole position of the year for Fabio Quartararo. Luca Marini then, well, he leads the Honda charge from the back of the 3rd row, 9th place. It's been a pretty dramatic weekend so far for the factory Honda squad. Very high profile and spectacular engine blow-ups at over 350 kilometers an hour for both Joan Mir and Marini so far here this weekend. Pedro Acosta, when you look at some still photos, some still images of Luca Marini's RC213V expiring in about 350 clicks down the Gardner Straight, somehow and thankfully taking evasive action at the last second, was Pedro Acosta. Lightning reflexes. He'd been blind as well by all the smoke coming out of the exhaust of Marini's stricken Honda. No dramas for Acosta then, 5th place on the grid. Be keen to see how Acosta fires away from the grid here. We know that the KTM C16 is an absolute missile off the line, isn't it? An absolute rocket ship. You won't be surprised to see Acosta immediately in the victory hunt early on. What about the thoughts of his crew chief Paul Trevathan? Well, he's with Jack.
Yeah, he is indeed, and I think you're absolutely right, Bertie, that if Pedro can get this KTM rocket fired off the line and into a strong position early on, then we saw in Mandalika, he's a tough man to get past.
Yeah, no, 100%. You know, he's got that skill that makes it very, very difficult to pass him. So he's improving every week as a rider. You know, that was something else he just added to his portemonnee, if you like, you know, to understand everything. And, you know, the big question here will be the front tyre, how it works. We haven't spent enough time on that really to really say that it's we need it. This is clear. And we just have to understand this, how the grip balance changes between front and rear. But other than that, then let's go racing.
Good luck.
Cheers, mate. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks to Paul Trevathan, very close to home, of course, is the Kiwi in this part of the world. 7 sprint podiums so far in his career for Pedro Acosta. Fabio Quartararo from pole position, never had a sprint victory. Jack Miller from third, never had a sprint victory. Ralph Fernandez and Pedro Acosta on that second row of the grid, also without a sprint victory. Is today the day that they potentially break their duck? Fabio Quartararo just getting himself focused and in the zone. You can see off into the distance the beautiful Bass Strait, surface paradise around this part of Australia. And Polispargo, what more can you say about old Palicho, the number 44 stand-in for the injured Maverick Vinales, 8th on the grid for Polispargo. Top KTM he was yesterday's best qualifying since Argentina, Tomas de Rio Hondo in the early part of 2022. Fresh off a shopping trip with his wife to New York. Maybe he should go emptying his wallet a little bit more often.
Yeah, expected to be walking around Macy's this weekend or down Times Square. In the end, he's riding around one of the great Grand Prix venues on the calendar, Phillip Island, 8th on the grid. Of course, when we saw him last back in Hungary, he did end up finishing in the top 10, just outside the points in the sprint, and 8th in the Grand Prix, showing that he has still got plenty to offer. He looks relaxed, he looks ready to go. What is going through the mind of Jack Miller right now? The first Aussie, as you mentioned, since Casey Stoner to put it on the front row of the grid in Australia. Is he thinking of a top 5, or is he thinking of a lot more?
There's been only 2 rounds so far this season where Miller on the Prima Prama Yamaha scored points in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. Sachsenring and Silverstone. He scored just 8 points across the last 6 rounds. It's been a bit of a tough time for Miller since we came back from the summer break. The good times, though, he thinks are rolling back at Yamaha with the imminent arrival of the V4 engine package. Jack, of course, under a contract for 2026, and when I spoke to him in the pre-event press conference on Thursday, he said the best of Miller is still to come. Feels like his best years are ahead of him. Front row of the grid then here for this Australian Grand Prix sprint. 13 laps of high-octane drama coming your way here at one of the fastest and most spectacular tracks on the calendar. Jack Miller, his first front row start since Japan in 2023. First time he's in the top 3 on a Yamaha. Marco Bezzecchi goes from the middle of the front row in second, but it's Fabio Quartararo with an all-time lap record. The Frenchman flying in Q2 this morning. He's on pole in ours.